All right, gang, this is Hexy. Let's talk about Khalkin Gol, the Battle of Khalkin Gol. The future here, short. I think it's already on Kickstarter. I believe for the 24th of October is what if I remember right. From Princeps Games. Uh, Luca was kind enough to send me a prototype copy of this, and a few other people out there got one too. I'm not going to go too deep into all of the components and the details of the game because Stuka, Marco Omnigamer, Rough Swordsman, Hex Encountered, and I believe even Gimp's got a copy out there that he's reviewing too. Um, you can't say enough about the components of the game. These guys do. I don't know what it is with some of these newer game companies now. They're really putting quality into the components of the game. Yeah, I know. We've all looked at the map and we've all seen it. Of course, they're sharp enough to provide two sides of the map, and I call it the simple side and the artistic side. And this is what the simple side looks like. This is completely functional. It's easy to understand. You can tell what a road is. You can tell what the terrain is. You can tell what your victory locations or your built-up areas are in this game. And this thing has got quite a focus on those built-up areas. Now, I started playing it pretty much within a day or two when I received it. And I was learning on the fly. Vuka was sending me some corrections when he would notice stuff in the first video I shot and giving me some updates. The game plays in 8 phases or 8 turns, however you want to address that. Doesn't take a long period of time to play this game. It does take a lot of you got to put a lot of brain work into it on how you want to attain your objectives in this game. Now, what I want to talk about is my gameplay. The first things they have these charts for espionage and deception, and I attempted to use them by spending points on these 2 charts, where you would, at such a point, after a die roll, you would earn, some special benefits, like withdrawing a unit before the battle as a defending player, or you can re-roll your own or your opponent's die if you're not satisfied with the result. I didn't get much out of that. I think there could be more into that, but I was also attempting to do, apparently I was doing it wrong because those benefits can carry over. I don't want to try to explain that, but apparently it can be used on multiple occasions. The air system in the game. Well, they abstracted the air system, and while I was attempting to use it at the start, and I continued to use it, but I wasn't getting much out of the air system in the game or how much effect it had. You're provided with anti-aircraft units, which they're all stationed at the air bases on the first turn of the game, and then the players can adjust them. And then you have air base strengths in the game, and then you see that number there, 1 through 7, or strength, which is strength and capacity of how many aircraft they could. The lower number would be how many aircraft they could have, with that air base strength, and you would apply those numbers through the charts here, and you could affect their political points or supply, as they call it. You could affect aircraft losses, and it's okay, simplistic, nothing fancy about it. I found that if I missed using it, it wasn't really a big deal in my gameplay. What I did find was the focus on the maneuver and the ground combat, okay? You have tank units, you have infantry units, you have artillery units, and you have cavalry units. Then you have headquarters, and then you have these leaders, all right? And your leader cards, you will have 3 leaders of different types that you will draw. I did mine blind, and you can only draw up to, they can only have so many points total together for their abilities down here, which I can't remember what the number was, whether it was 9 or something like that, but you would draw 1 for artillery, 1 for tanks, and 1 for infantry. And that number that you would see on that card for that leader, they would affect 1 formation of that type, and that formation, if they could never roll lower than what that leader's number is in combat. So if you ended up rolling a 1 for combat for an artillery command that was being led, so to speak, by this commander, your roll would be a 2 minimum. Okay, so simple. All right, nice. I think what would really make these things good is the information. If there were more information on these cards about these leaders, but maybe the rule book, maybe the final rule book will have that stuff. But there's some just the fact of knowing who these guys were. I mean, we're talking about a battle that, me personally, I don't know of any other simulations or games out there that covers this. So I'm sure there probably is some, or there's probably some in some of the scenario type games out there, like maybe in a squad leader or something like that. Maybe there's some scenarios around this involving that. But from what my understanding is it was pretty much a fight over what each side, between the Russians and the Japanese, of who owned what land. And what I found during my play was I never found much opportunity for the Japanese to strike the Russians with any formidable force. I attempted to cross the river one time up in the north, and then found myself as the Russians were pushing up through the gaps up here in the north, which you can't see because it's up there. But as I found the Russians pushing through the north up here on the road and around, that it was too much for the Japanese to put enough force together to mount an offensive against them. And then down in the south, it was pretty much the same thing. Right from the start, the Japanese were on the defense, because the amount of forces I had for the Russians pushing along this corridor right here were too much. Now, amazingly enough, I never did get to Namahan, whatever the name of that town is right here, which is, I believe, is an instant victory condition, okay? Or and I never had to worry for the Japanese to get over here and take, I don't know which town it was, or whether it's this Tomsak, Bulak town, or something up here. Or maybe it's that hill or something, I don't know. But neither one of those were ever in danger. I mean, the Soviets were pushing maybe with a couple more phases, couple more turns, it would have happened. But if the game ends with neither achieving the victory condition, then the Japanese win. All right, because they would have held off the Russian onslaught, which this is where Georgy Zhukov's notoriety sort of went into play for the rest of his career. Even though I want to say that old Georgie had it up and down with Uncle Joe at one time there during operations on the East Front, but he eventually, he became the big dog, the right-hand man to Joe Stalin. So the game comes with these event cards for the calendar, all right, and they're numbered with the appropriate phase number on them, or turn number, however you want to call it, and then they have an event on them, and I did a blind draw of the cards for each of the turns. I think there's like 4 for each turn, 3 or 4 for each of the turns. Oh, some leader cards in there. And you flip them during a certain phase of the turn to see what effect it has, i.e., on the first phase, if you had this card, crossing the river forward for Japanese units costs no movement points. All right? Okay. Much benefit to that. Don't know how big of a benefit that would be. Soviet artillery of choice loses 1 strength. Japanese take 4 political points. The PPC chart remains unchanged. I don't know. And a lot of this is because I didn't get to play the first game, the Freezing Inferno. So I never got a chance to see the system up front. I had to play this sort of play this right from the start. The flow of the game during movement and combat is pretty simple. You'll do your combats. You'll have the strength of the unit, the lead unit in the attack, and then you get another strength point for each other unit in the stack underneath him. So if you got a stack of 5 units and the top unit that is the lead unit, and he's got an attack strength of 3, he's going to get 3, plus it's a stack of 5 units, so he's going to get 3 plus 5, that's going to be an 8. And then the same thing works on the defender side. He's going to get his defense strength, which will be the second number in a counter, which I'm sorry, my counters are already bagged up. Didn't want to lose anything. But as you can see, the numbers there, the second number in the top right corner will be the defense, plus the number of counters that are in the stack. The counters are also marked with their movement point, and they also have a reverse side. So when one of these infantry units gets reduced on his reverse side, that's a cavalry unit, sorry. Yeah, well, maybe not. I want to say there was a reverse side to these things where there's some other effect on. Anyhow, well, I should probably just pull it out, right? Make it easier. But the game flowed fine through movement and combat. I had 0 issues with that. All right, well, the unit is both on the same side, so, all right. But the game flowed just fine through. You move, you do your attacks. You've got a combat chart, which I happen to like very much. The combat chart gives you your odds breakdown, your point differential breakdown, right there, and you've got multiple possible effects for combat. I did notice that there's very few two-sided, like attacker and defender both suffer a result. But it's a good-looking combat results card. It's simple and it's easy to understand. So there's no issues with that right there. The game runs in an action sequence, okay? And the action sequence, I got a nice card right there for you to look at. Round one is out there by itself. And then rounds 2 through 8 through the final of the game have a couple more additions to it. And then you've got a unit cost chart. So you'll get a phase in here where you can purchase units and build your force strengths back up. Now, it seemed to me that the Russians were capable of providing more reinforcement than the Japanese. I believe the Russians start out with more political points, which you can see the track down the side over here. It starts up in the corner up there, comes all the way down, and goes all the way over to here. Okay? And the Russians start out with pretty much more of everything than the Japanese do. And I was able to replenish their losses, not drastically, but with a little more. I mean, if it was, I was able to build 2 units for the Japanese, I might have been able to rebuild 4 for the Soviets. Could have been just how I was applying them, whether you were doing, because whether you were doing tank or whether you were doing infantry or whether you were doing cavalry, spending those points. But beyond all of that, the in-depth details of the game they don't go too far. There are subtle points to the game to give the game a little bit of color, a little bit of flair. And then for the most part, your actions they're very basic. They're very easy to follow in the rule books, and they're very easy to execute on the map. I honestly think that if you wanted to, you could sit down in one day and play this thing from top to bottom without any issues, okay? You have weather, which weather really never affected anything I did here. You've got where terrain costs get increased, or you've got 4 weather conditions. It looks like you got fog, wind, rain, and clear. You might increase movement, reduce bomber accuracy, which, could affect, if you're doing a supply thing where you're knocking down political points off the other team. Clear terrain, wetland hexes, where it costs you 1 point and clear, but there's no effect on anything. One of the little trickier points about the game that I didn't grasp at first is crossing these rivers, all right? Now, I'm thinking maybe with me it's because I didn't have any bridge markers in the game to do that with, but a unit could spend its entire move, cross the river, and now there's a bridge here. And what I didn't know was, and Vuka squared that off for me, is I thought that once the unit moved away from the river, that the bridge was gone. But no, he says the bridge remains there. Well, like I said, I didn't have any counters to do that, so I did not account for that. You have who owns what markers on it, and then you've got this non-T. This counter here marks if you have a certain result on the combat chart where a unit might suffer the effects called non-T, which means for the duration of the phase, they cannot attack anything. All right? So kind of a way of disrupting, so to speak. Let's call it that. It's a one way of disrupting. You have defender retreats, and then you have strength losses. If you suffer 2 losses in combat, it's, you might have a stack of 5 units. Well, you take 2 units off, okay? And now you have a stack of 3 units, all right? And for the most part, you're going to want everything in stacks of 5 in this game here. There are no major terrain benefits in this game. They're very subtle. And like I say, in my playthrough, the Japanese were on the defense all the time. And once the Russians cleared this so to speak, this crossroad, this victory location right here, it was trying to dash as fast as they could up there to Namahan. Never got there. The Japanese were able to hold on, so the game ended, and the Japanese did get a victory. I don't know how you classify the victory, but This is not normally the kind of game you see Hexy put on the table, but it was offered to me. They make a great product, and I jumped at the opportunity to get a chance to test play this. The game does play easy. You won't have any issues with it. I like to see what the final rule book's going to look like. Give you some nice, pretty dice that come with the game. And of course, the box of stuff comes in. Those you got that Freezing Inferno and got this, it's great because the units are not so vast in difference that you can't bag them and stick them inside the box, the one larger box in the tray where, I'll show it to you. The one larger box in the tray where your mat boards and stuff come in, I put them in baggies and they go right there on top of the charts and stuff. And then your cards and dice go in these other boxes. I mean, you could put counters over here too if you wanted to. So, and then once you put everything back in the box and put the lid on it, the components of the box sitting on top of these things will keep this thing shut. And it's a great box. We say it was a 4-inch box. So having a hard time storing it because you figure that there eats up 2 games, sometimes almost even 3 in like the 1.5-inch boxes. So, yeah, enjoyable. Not the crunch that there's a lot of us out there that love the crunchy games. This one's not crunchy. It is a representation of a battle that we probably don't have much on out there. So I'm going to say, yeah. If you want to get something that's interesting, unique, if you enjoyed Freezing Inferno, like I said, I have that now, and I need to play that, then this is a good buy for you. I don't know what the sticker is on this thing yet, but I believe the Kickstarter is already started or is fixing to start. But yeah, I would say this one is worth having and playing 2 or 3 times because I think if you're playing with a buddy, and I know all the other guys talked about these hidden setup charts that they give you in the book for the Russians and then for the Japanese to deploy your units on, probably be better to blow these up so you can write on them better. I think that could make the replayability of the game, at least for 2-player, just tremendous. Or maybe have a buddy, if you're going to play it by yourself, maybe get a buddy to do your deployment for one of the sides and you don't look at it. And you set up the other side, and then you drop the deployment for the other side. There's one way around that if you wanted to play solo. I didn't find too much of a distraction by just me playing a solo and sitting on both sides the way I wanted. I mean, I put the Japanese on the defensive because that's the way I saw this coming out. And then I set the Soviets up. Well, I'll take that back. Here's how I actually did this. I rolled a dice, and I just did an odd or even thing. And if it was Japanese odd and Russian were even, if I rolled an odd, I took a Japanese stack and I set it up on the board. So I might have rolled 3 odds in a row and I set up 3 Japanese stacks, and the next thing you know, I roll 4 Russians in a row, and maybe the Russians for that piece of the deployment got a little bit of advantage. But it went both ways. Regardless, it ended up me having a 2-pronged attack, one in the south and one in the north, trying to use those roads to the best of my advantage. I did eventually I did use the rivers down here, but like I say, I had no bridge markers, and I thought that once the unit left, there was going to be no bridge left. And then late in the game, I tried to push something across the middle here. A little slow, but they got across. I did take this, but it didn't matter because by the time I did take this, the Russians had already blown the Japanese out here and pushed them out of the way, pushed them to the back. I will say this, though, up here in the north, let me swing around here. I'm in my kitchen doing this because my other table's pretty big and occupied. I never got through here with the Russians. I never got beyond this point. The Japanese were able to keep them handcuffed right there through the whole game. Really no effort. Had just enough Japanese to keep the Russians from trying to bypass across that river. And it's not like you get unlimited amount of bridges, apparently. From what I said, I guess there's really only one. I could be wrong, but I think that's what I've heard the other guys say that are reviewing it. All right, so Princeps Games, Khalkin Gol. I believe it's on Kickstarter. If not, you'll see it soon. The battle itself, the components, the box, and the simplicity of play, yeah, I think that makes this a purchase if you like that stuff. Just the battle alone does it for me, having a game on Khalkin Gol, because I really don't know much about it, but now this is going to make me want to learn more about it. And like I said, I have not seen the final rule book yet. I imagine that with the rest of the components the way they are, that the rule book will be magnificent. And the counter mix, like I said, I don't know if this is the endpoint counter mix, but like I say, nice dice, love the dice. But the counters are nice. They're thick. They're already pre-rounded. They fall out of the sprues. Just bag them up, box them up, however you do it. The cards are nice. Maybe sleeve the cards. I don't know how you sleeve all the different sizes. But they're minimal, but they add a little flair to the game. All right, so there you have it. Khalkin Gol, Princeps Games, coming out very, very soon. Get your eyeballs over there at Princeps Games and check out the Kickstarter. And yeah, I'd say jump on this one. Give it a good go. All right, we'll talk to y'all soon.